Shore, Wisconsin. Yeah, I was out in an open 26-foot double-ender Lach straight construction. It's an old Coast Guard rescue boat.
Oh, yeah.
And I had teenagers doing it. And so I called and so Bill's got their budget. So we're not going to rescue you. I said, you know, none of these kids were with me.
I'm testing the mic.
They're the children of powerful Chicago attorneys. They were there so fast. They almost ran me over. Yeah, the next thing I saw was the stem of it. Yeah. Interview each kid, you know.
Yeah. Who's your old man?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, everyone, I have the distinct pleasure this evening of introducing our speaker, Mark Lach. Mark is the creative producer of Titanic, the exhibition, which you can see right now in Skokie at Old Orchard. From the Titanic wreck site at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean to the Vatican's private museums and libraries to King Tut's tomb in Egypt, Mark Lach has been inspired by unique adventures to shape the way visitors experience some of the world's most popular traveling exhibits. Lach's storied career spans 3 decades as the creative force behind some of the world's most popular traveling exhibitions. He has spearheaded the design for more than 40 Titanic exhibitions viewed by over 14 million people on 4 continents. Lach has also led the creative development of Tutankhamun and the Golden Age of the Pharaohs, St. Peter and the Vatican, the Legacy of the Popes, Real Pirates, the Untold Story of the Whydah, America I Am, the African American imprint, and Saturday Night Live, the exhibition, as well as Titanic, the exhibition. Please, everyone, join me to welcome Mark Lach.
Thanks, everyone. What a pleasure to be with you tonight. I've met some of you already in the parking lot, and I know folks are watching online. It's always a bit humbling to hear a introduction like that, as you can imagine, especially the way it all started for me. Many years ago, when Titanic was in the theaters, Cameron's film Titanic, you know, everybody was talking about the film, everybody was talking about the history of Titanic. I got a phone call from a complete stranger who said, without really saying much more as I answered the phone, back then it was a landline, and he said very aggressively, said, "I hear you're the guy to do my Titanic exhibition." And I had to pause, and fortunately I'm on the phone, it's not a Zoom call or anything. And I said, "Who are you and how did you get my name? And I think you got the wrong guy." And he said, "Well, a colleague of yours, Dave Walker, says you're the best in the business." Well, I'd never designed an exhibit in my life. I'd never done anything like that. And I smiled because Dave Walker was a bass player in a band I was in years before that, who thought I could do anything. And I said, "Well, thank you, and thanks to Dave." But like I said, and this gentleman, by the way, he was putting together kind of an exhibit attraction in Orlando, Florida. I live in St. Petersburg, lived there then, live there now. And so it was an hour and 45 minutes from my house. And quite frankly, he saw an opportunity. He was a very sincere guy and a very respectful guy, but he saw the opportunity with this buzz around Titanic to do more of an attraction / exhibition. And I respectfully declined. I said, like I just told you, you got the wrong guy. And as I hung up the phone, I realized, man, that is an opportunity. What was I thinking? And for some reason, I said to myself, you know, if he calls back tomorrow, I'm going to go over and check that out and see, because it kind of fit. I was in the entertainment business, as we know, as I just told you, an embarrassing big hair moment in the 80s with rock bands. And I just thought this seemed interesting because it was the way he was talking about a very theatrical presentation. Welcome, good to have you. We just started, so you haven't missed anything except my big hair moment. And fortunately, there are no photos of that in the presentation tonight.
In the 80s, if you dialed *69, it would call them back.
That's right. That's right. Well, I was more, I think, it all had to do with that. I think we've all been there. And I tell this story when I talk to like junior high school kids about self-esteem, belief in yourself, what you can do. But it was me as an adult saying, I don't think I'm good enough to do that. And I think we all, to some degree, can relate to that. So unbelievably, he called back the next day. And I was like, well, there you go. And I said no again for the same reason. Put on the spot, said, I don't think, and this was a multi-million-dollar project, right? So I said, thanks again. I think you need to find the right guy for this project. Hung up the phone. And then I said to Mike, if he calls back tomorrow, for sure I'll do. He called back the next day. And he said to me, I don't know what I'm doing here, fortunately for me. And he said, can you recommend anybody? And by this time, given a third chance, I built my self-esteem up a little bit myself. And I said, well, why don't I come over? Like I said, I'm an hour and 45 minutes away. Why don't I come over and see what you're doing? And I drove over. Welcome, you guys. Have a seat. Good to have you. You haven't missed anything, except the important parts. But by the way, welcome to everybody online, too. I know we got a lot of folks. Good to have you. Find a seat. There's also, I think, some food and some drink in the back. So I drove over to Orlando, and I started to talk to this guy. And the more I heard what he wanted to do, the more I had a little belief in myself. And I took the gig, took the job. We spent what was supposed to be, I think, a couple months, probably 7 months, putting together a very theatrical presentation of the Titanic. The reason we spent 7 months is because somebody on the job had no idea what he was doing. That was me. We spent way too much money, took way too much time, but at the end of the day, we did something I was very proud of. And I remember thinking, well, what's next for me? What's going to happen now that, because it was a chapter, it was not a career at this point. It was a chapter in my life. Right before we opened the exhibit, I got a phone call from a company or an organization called RMS Titanic. They were and are the organization that has the exclusive salvage rights of the wreck of the Titanic. Legally, they're the only ones that can visit the wreck site, go down and retrieve artifacts to this day. Now they said, hey, we've heard what you've done in Orlando. You're obviously very good and very experienced. Would you be interested in doing our exhibitions that travel the world with the artifacts from the ocean floor? And I said, I'd be very interested. So we met. Next thing you know, we're building an exhibition that is going to open at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago in February of 2000. So if some of you that saw my photograph online, that's from 24 years ago. So I'm sorry this person's here instead. But so excited. And we opened the exhibit to great fanfare and incredible attendance. Okay, incredible. I think we did 1 million people over a period. We opened in like I said, in February. I think we went all the way through October, something like that. And I got the bug, the selfish bug that, boy, I really enjoy this. You're putting together something theatrical. It's got entertainment somewhere in there, but it's also something quite real. And with the story of Titanic, of course, the film was out. Cameron's film was everywhere, and people still talk about it today. So it had this theatrical element, but much like Cameron's film, it also had a very human element, a historical element that I knew that I found a place. Now, I thought it was going to be just Titanic. And as the gracious introduction from Madeline said, I've had the good fortune of doing some other things over the years. Here in Chicago, did the King Tut exhibit at the Field Museum, did the Saturday Night Live exhibit at the Museum of Broadcast Communications, yep, in Chicago, downtown. The Hamilton musical exhibit on Northerly, that's always hard for me to say, Northerly Island. So it's been quite a run. And I had stopped doing the Titanic exhibition. And the guy that I worked with those many years ago, and for many years after that, as we toured the artifacts from the ocean floor around the world, he has started to tour an exhibition again. Now, these artifacts are not from the ocean floor, but a very wonderful exhibition. We talked to someone who, what was your name? I'm sorry?
Mike.
Mike. Mike saw the exhibit. I don't know if any of you have in Skokie. Okay, fantastic. And it reminds me in many ways of what we did those 24 years ago. And then we followed up 2 years later at MSI with another exhibit that was also very well attended. So I had kind of found my place, but I hadn't been doing Titanic for a while. Some of you, if you walk through this wonderful museum in this wonderful building, and thank you so much for hosting me tonight. And we have an association now that we'll talk about a little bit. But the Eastland disaster, are some of you familiar with that? It's amazing how many Chicagoans aren't. And in our exhibit, towards the end of the exhibit, we have an Eastland gallery. And we'll show that here in just a little bit. Some of you may know part of the tie-in. It was 3 years after Titanic sank. The Eastland had added lifeboats to the top of an already unstable ship, whether it was the exact cause or not, but that, as we know, the ship rolled over in the Chicago River, killing more passengers than Titanic. Now, Titanic had many crew members that were lost, but 844, I think, Natalie, 845? Yep, 844. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I had moved on a little bit, not moved on or past, but I was doing other exhibitions. And Tom gave me a shout and says, you know, we're going back to Chicago with the Titanic exhibit. I know how much you love Chicago. And I know that you worked with the Eastland Disaster Historical Society to put together a gallery 24 years ago at MSI. And people would walk through Chicago, and certainly folks that were from out of town, but would look at this incredible, because there were cameras everywhere, as we know, right, for that disaster. So very vivid presentation. So Tom called me back. We put an Eastland gallery in the Titanic exhibit, helped a little bit, not much, but a little bit with the actual exhibit itself, because it's very much like what we did before. So here I am again doing Titanic, and have been doing press now for 3 weeks, and traveling to different folks and talking to them about the Titanic. And your first love is your best love, I think, because here I am, because it has such, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Besides doing the exhibit, the company RMS Titanic, that was ready to go out on a dive later that year, July, August, September, to the wreck site, asked me, Mark, would you like to go on the expedition to the Titanic? Exactly. That was, who said wow? Because I said, okay, I said wow as well. Pardon me. I said wow as well. And when I went there, we'll talk about that in a bit, I really didn't know for certain that I was going to be able to dive. Just being out there, right, above the wreck site, and being with the world's great experts, the historians, and spending some time, but it resulted in actually getting in one of those submersibles and going down to the ocean floor. When we were here in Chicago, I'll tell you this very quickly, we had started to make plans to do another Titanic, this is 24 years ago, to do another Titanic exhibition in Las Vegas. And I was to leave early morning. This was in July 26th or 7th. I was to leave early morning to fly to Las Vegas to check out the venue, okay? And I got back to had a wonderful apartment right off of Michigan Avenue, loving life, loving Chicago. And I got back late from the exhibit, late from Museum of Science and Industry. And I thought, oh, I forgot there was like some documents that I had to have with me. So I either go back now that I'm tired in the evening, or before I go to O'Hare, I go back to the exhibit early in the morning because there's 24-hour security, and then head to O'Hare and off to Las Vegas. So that's what I did. So I think it was like 4 in the morning, right? And I go to the one security desk that's open at that hour. By this time, we know each other well. I gave a hello to the security guard, went into my little office in the exhibit within the confines of the actual exhibition, and got my paperwork, went home, got up hours later, headed to O'Hare, landed in Las Vegas. And when I turned my phone back on, I've got 8 voicemails. Now that's not highly unusual, I guess, but it's early morning still, right? And because the flight was at like 6:45 or something. And these are, I won't tell you all 8 because I don't remember them exactly, but the first one was something like, Hey, Mark, it's Bob at the museum. Give me a call, man. Okay, the next one, right after. Hey, Mark, Bob calling. Could you call me? Next one. Hey, Mark, call me ASAP, please. He doesn't know I'm in Las Vegas, right? Well, I finally called back, and this, I tell you this because it was the front page of the Chicago Tribune the day after. There was a theft at the exhibition, and one of the pieces from the exhibition was missing. And so without leaving the airport, without leaving the gate, the next flight back to Chicago was right out of that same gate. I got right back, came back. It was a little black book that was recovered on the ocean floor by the, oh, I'm forgetting the name of the company now, but it was like a corporate pass out. It was almost like a diary, but very small, by an ale company, A-L-E. And it was gone. And we could not figure out what in the world, right? We have security cameras, the cases are secured. Well, this becomes front page news. The museum closes that day. Busloads of children coming from all over the Midwest are turned away, crying children because they wanted to, but they had to shut down. Now, it turns out that a theft like this in a museum is a federal offense, right? So I have now a meeting with the FBI downtown, and I'm ready. You know, they know that I know the exhibit well, and I always laugh when I see Chicago PD on the phone because I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it felt like going into a gray room with a steel desk, a single light bulb above, and some gentleman that starts to question me. Mark, so you're the designer, so you live here in Chicago, we understand that you went into the exhibit at 4 a.m. and left with something and then headed to Las Vegas. Yeah, that's right. And then, exactly. Well, there's another guy in the room, and it's the classic good cop, bad cop. And while the gentleman that's questioning me very graciously, those of you online won't see this, but the other gentleman's like this. And it occurs to me that they think I might have taken it. I'm a suspect. So I said, wait, you don't think I took it, do you? And the guy like this. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So I have to go through, no, I was doing this. And well, thank you, Mr. Lach. Will you be in town for a while? We may want to question you again. Yes, I'll be. Well, actually, I'm heading to Canada and then to the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean day after tomorrow. That was when the dive was, right? So when I landed, and we'll talk, maybe we can start as far as some visuals now, but when I landed in St. John's, Newfoundland, where I was to take a 36-hour boat ride to the wreck site and join the mothership that held the submersibles, got a phone call that indeed they'd located the book, found the thief, and the book was back in its place in the exhibition. And I got away with it. No. Just kidding. So, as you know, this week is a special week with Titanic. It was this Monday at 2:20 in the morning when Titanic finally dipped below the ocean surface and was lost forever until it was discovered by the French team and also Bob Ballard. Some of you may know those names, or maybe Bob Ballard, exactly. So that was Monday. So here we are on Friday talking about Titanic. Let's start with going out to the wreck. I'm going to tell you about my personal experience, and we'll look at the exhibition a little bit as well. This is a map, obviously. Titanic left Southampton, England that same day on April 10th, 1912, 112 years ago. Went to Cherbourg, France to pick up passengers, and then went to Queenstown, Ireland, and then set off for the United States, for New York. And I know we all know the story. We've seen the movies, we've seen the theatrical presentations, but imagine the excitement being on the most luxurious ship in the world, the rich and famous on board, the real movers and shakers. But more importantly, I would say, and more tragically, simple immigrants with everything they owned in a leather bag, filling third class on their way to the United States to pursue their hopes and dreams. And our April 14th, you see where that mark is, pretty close to New York, April 14th. At 11:40 in the evening, Titanic scraped along the iceberg. And as some of you know too, originally it just seemed like a shudder in the ship, right? It didn't seem like a big deal. It did not hit the iceberg straight on. In fact, it just scraped along the starboard side. And as I'll maybe say this a lot tonight because children walk up to me sometimes. I'm not a historian. I'm not an expert really, but I've sat at the feet of so many experts over the years. But Titanic was labeled practically unsinkable. And the reason for that is the new technology of watertight compartments. And if Titanic would have hit the iceberg straight on, it wouldn't have sunk. Can you believe it? But because they tried to avoid the iceberg, scraped along the side, and too many of those watertight compartments were breached. And when Captain Smith was notified, he was to the bridge immediately, and I want to share something with you about him in just a minute. But when Captain Smith, who was on the bridge almost immediately after it scraped along the iceberg, because he felt the shiver in his ship, he knew that Titanic was going to sink. When Thomas Andrews, the designer, came to the bridge, he knew there were not enough lifeboats on board, and he knew that no one was answering the distress signal. The California, a ship very nearby, in fact, saw the Titanic, saw its lights on, saw it dead in the water after it scraped the iceberg, saw the flares going off that were meant to be distress flares. The captain of the California had his radio off because it was not law that he had to keep it on 24 hours a day. And someone, testimony showed, someone on his crew said, I wonder what those flares are about. He says, oh, those are the rich folks on the Titanic just celebrating being on the greatest ship in the world. If the California had its radio on, it would have responded and no one would have been lost. You know, but it wasn't until the Carpathia responded hours away that it showed up at the site of the sinking, which is shown here by the X. Well, the FBI not happy that I was leaving the country, but I left from Chicago, flew to Toronto, and then flew to St. John's, Newfoundland. And the Keldysh, the Russian vessel, if you've seen Cameron's film, I'll reference that a few times tonight, you'll see this at the beginning of the film. The Keldysh, the academic Keldysh, it has the Mir 1 and the Mir 2, two submersibles that were the state of the art at the time. They've been retired since. It was heading from, Kaliningrad, I think is the name of the city, to the wreck site, okay? I was heading from Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland, a beautiful place, took a small vessel for 36 hours straight after we landed, and after I know that indeed the missing book had been recovered. And you see that journey there, and met the Keldysh there. And the Keldysh was sitting, and the expedition had already begun, actually. And they were diving the ship. And this was almost exclusively to recover artifacts from the ocean floor. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But as I boarded the ship, through a door here that was almost sea level on the side of the vessel, I knew that I was in for the experience of my life, and still not knowing that I was going to dive the Titanic. Go through these images here. It's a vessel that's half the size of the Titanic. I think it was about 400 feet long. A research vessel from Russia. Anatoly Sigailovich was the captain. He also worked with James Cameron very closely. Oh, you know that guy from 24 years ago. I always look at this and laugh a little bit because I was 36 hours on that boat, bumping up and down. I was exhausted, but this was when we had orientation. We had a meal and we had orientation, and still was not going to dive the ship. I was so excited, but you don't see it really in my face there, but on board the ship. This is where they built that temporary helipad for the film, where the elderly Rose and her granddaughter helicopter out to the wreck, if you remember that. So that they really don't have a helipad. That was done just for the film. And Cameron and Anatoly, this is the captain, shot the film from this very vessel. So that was sexy as well, being on this vessel. And I have to tell you very quickly, James Cameron had not seen one of the exhibitions, certainly when we were in Chicago being the first. But years later, we were in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and we had a smaller exhibition there. And the PR person came to me one morning and she said, Mark, James Cameron is coming to our opening and to our gala. there's a chance he's coming. And I had to smile because this was a small exhibit, no grand staircase, no real theatrics. It was more of a basic exhibit. And I looked at her thinking in my head, James Cameron is not coming to Oklahoma City to see this exhibit. Well, it turns out that his wife, who played the granddaughter in the film, do you remember? He ended up marrying her. She was from Oklahoma City. Her drama teacher in high school was on the board of the museum, and he was coming back to Oklahoma City to meet her family. I said, well, there might be a chance he's coming to the exhibit, right? So I was pretty excited about that. The morning of the press and the morning of the event in the evening, a big gala, she comes to me and the PR person, I'm forgetting her name now, but hands me the weekend section of the newspaper. Remember those newspapers? And it had the Titanic exhibit on the cover. And I opened it up, and a wonderful photograph of the exhibit. And in that story, there was a sidebar story that says James Cameron coming to Oklahoma City. And I was like, well, I'm going to meet James Cameron. I'm not exaggerating, I'm paraphrasing. But the first line was something like, famed director James Cameron is visiting Oklahoma City and attending a gala for the Titanic exhibition this evening, or whatever it was. And the next line was a quote from Cameron, paraphrasing again, the last thing I want to do is see a Titanic exhibit. So I'm like, great, this will be good. Because in there is my itinerary. Meet James Cameron, take him through the exhibit for 20 minutes. I said, this is going to be the longest 20 minutes of my life. Well, that evening, standing outside in the circle drive of the museum, up drives an Escalade, or the equivalent, big SUV. James Cameron sitting in the front seat. Remember, it's a big gala that night, too. Full tux and tails, all white, whatever that's called, formal wear. And he gets out of the vehicle, he opens the door, his wife gets out, full gown. You were encouraged to come in costume, right? Another car pulls up behind, another car pulls up behind, another car pulls up behind, and her family, brothers and sisters, all get out, all in costume. The mother and father are in the last car, and the mother is dressed like Leonardo DiCaprio. Got corduroy pants on, and she's just a firecracker. And I'm not sure I've ever confirmed this, but I was told that Cameron had costumes from the film flown out to Oklahoma City and tailored for all the family to attend the gala. I'm happy to say he could not have been more enthusiastic, more gracious. He said, Mark, well, I'm really excited to see this exhibit tonight. And then I had to get in there that I dove the ship, right? So I told him that, well, best bros then, right? Remember when wasn't this amazing when you do this? So we had a wonderful time together, and he could not have been more gracious. So back to this. Here's our Cameron story for the evening. When you board the ship, you have, there are do's and don'ts, and there are also lifeboat drills, which of course, the irony of that, right? I don't know. Irony is always a tough word, I know. But the Keldysh had its own lifeboats, and Titanic didn't have enough, as we know. If you look here, the submersible, one of them is bottom right there. There are two of them, Mirror 1 and the Mirror 2. Looking the opposite direction, you see the propeller of the submersible as well. Now, I'm still not diving the ship, remember, but excited to be there. So I want to take you through the process and the procedure. There's a big crane, and you see it to the right of the screen there, that lifts the submersible into the ocean. First, you got to board the submersible. This is the front of the submersible, and you see these incredibly sophisticated, in many ways, portholes. 6 inches in diameter, left and right, I think 8 inches in the center, but they're also 6 inches thick because of the pressure at the bottom of the ocean, 2.5 miles down and further. So when you put your face up to that in the inside, you have this kind of perfect peripheral vision because it's flared out. The reason it's flared out is if it was just in a hole, in a cylinder, the pressure would push it right through. So it pushes against the 6 inches thick acrylic, pushes against the porthole, so it doesn't go through. So the yellow toolbox there is for you to take off your shoes and leave a few things behind because you're getting in, but you're taking, without your shoes, you're taking a jacket and a couple pair of socks because the temperature is about to change when you descend to the ocean floor. This is a shot of inside the submersible. Jenna is the pilot. These two folks, I don't remember their names, but the front of the submersible is at the bottom of this photograph. And the pilot, Jenna, in this case, sits in the middle, has a joystick, you see it there, and a compass in front of him. And he's the only one that really sits. The accommodations are not great. You see this young lady, that's a settee on the side. It's being inside of a ball, being in the front seat of a very small car with two other people for the next 12 hours. As you descend to the bottom, spend time on the bottom and come up. It takes 2 hours and 15 minutes or so to go down and to come up as well. So once the hatch is secured above you, the crane picks it up, puts it into the ocean, and this was fascinating. I couldn't really get, it was such bad quality, but I'll give you a web or a YouTube or what you can search of what the recovery process is and also the deployment process. You see the boat there. As soon as this submersible hits the ocean, and even if it's a calm day, the North Atlantic Ocean is not like a lake. It's still these large rolling waves. The minute it hits the ocean, this boat takes off and pulls it away from the Keldysh. And this gentleman who hops on top, affectionately known as the cowboy, rides the submersible out to far enough away because soon it's going to be cut loose and the descent will start. Here he is, disconnecting the cable. Jenna's inside, still on the ocean surface, ready to be free-flowing, if you will. And then he jumps off. This boat comes by at incredible speeds. He jumps off, almost always gets in the boat, but sometimes barely makes it. And then the descent begins, okay? Well, we wait all day long. And there was a volleyball court on the top of the ship with netting around. We played volleyball all day. I got to associate with the experts, like I said, and we're waiting 12 hours for the submersibles to return. And when it does, the cowboy does his thing again, hooks it up, brings it back on the deck, and then the artifacts that were recovered underneath the submersible, there are baskets. So the pieces that some of you have seen this on TV, I'm sure, the baskets are filled with pieces that are this size that could be picked up with robotic arms. Put in the basket, the baskets are retrieved, and that's how the smaller items are brought back to the ocean or back to the surface. I also, as a younger man, participated in this. This is pulling some of the things out of the basket you see to the right here. And it was just about now that I found out in a very interesting and fun way that I was going to dive the Titanic. I'm going to pause for a minute. So those at home, the screen is black for now. But some of you in this room are of the age, you remember when grades were posted on a wall, right? You didn't go online to find out your grades. If you're in college, you go and see, and the professors put your grades on the wall. Well, that's how they posted the dive, who was going to dive and when they were going to dive. And I wasn't certain yet if I was going to dive. So for everyone else, it was very routine, all right? And when I say dive, by the way, Mir 1 leaves at 9 in the morning. 30 minutes later, Mir 2 is deployed. So dive 1, Mir 1, Mir 2. Dive 2, Mir 1, Mir 2. A number of dives had gone, maybe a third of those 14 dives that were planned had already happened when I got out there. Now they were posting the other dives. And I kind of sheepishly stood in the back of the room and made my way forward. And I'm looking at dive 5, Mir 1 mark, dive 6, dive 7, dive 8, no mark Lach. Well, that's okay. I'm having the time of my life. I may as well finish dive 10, dive 11, dive 12, not superstitious, dive 13. There's my name. If something's going to happen, it's going to be on dive 13. But still, hi there, welcome. Still very excited. Now, there isn't much preparation, okay? You don't really need to know much other than to hold your, what's the line? Oh, there's a joke, I'll get to it. But your bladder has to be strong, or you have to use that small area to kind of get on your side, if you will. But other than kind of getting some briefing in the morning and the day before, you're along for the ride because you're in a pressurized sphere. So that morning, very excited, couldn't sleep the night before. The whole ship turns out, by the way. There's 300 crew on the ship. They almost all speak Russian, no English. But boy, are they excited to have you. And they treat every submersible that is taken off the deck and goes down to the ocean floor. They know that it's dangerous, I guess is the word. They know that it's not just a walk in the park. So almost the whole crew turns out. Okay, so as I got up on top of that submersible and took off my shoes, had my lunch that they put in a paper bag for us, just a sandwich and an apple, and got down in the submersible for the first time. It's like, oh boy, no turning back now, right? So I got off to the starboard side, the right side on that little settee, and Jenna came in, and also another Russian pilot came with us that day. Sometimes there are two that are observers. Now these are historians. These are folks that know what the collection should have, meaning what to pick up on the ocean floor. My dive was not to be an artifact dive. They wanted me to see the Titanic. They wanted, and we'll talk about that just in a second, not spend the laborious time of picking up artifacts, but see the bow section, the stern section. They're about a third of a mile apart. Titanic broke apart at the surface. The bow and the stern fell to the ocean floor and landed that far apart. The only place you can pick up artifacts is from the debris field around, okay? So I knew I wasn't picking up artifacts, that was fine. So as I get in and they secure that hatch above, pick up the submersible, put it into the ocean, and from the deck, watching it a few times, it looked pretty stable. Well, you're inside of a beach ball in the North Atlantic Ocean, and you don't have seatbelts, and you're just kind of holding on for dear life as the cowboy jumps on top and they pull it away, and then we start the descent. And the reason I didn't want to show any video or any images right now, I just want you kind of go there with me, if you will. I looked out my porthole, bright blue ocean, almost Caribbean blue. It was a beautiful day, a hot day. And the bright blue ocean, when we started our descent, within 15 minutes, slowly faded to black. Now we're in the dark. Few lights of instruments on, like the dashboard lights in a car. But now we're in the submersible in the dark for the next 2 hours as we descend. Now the physical makeup of the submersible, as it descends, as they take on water in the ballast area, it turns the whole way down. Now it's very slight, you don't notice it, but remember I pointed out that compass in front of the pilot? I watched that compass for 2.5 hours, 2 hours, about 2 hours in the dark, and also a gauge that was counting up in meters, 1 meter, 2 meter, 100 meters deep, 1,000 meters deep. It's getting cold inside now. So those extra socks are going on. Those extra jackets are going on. It's not comfortable. I'm anything but comfortable, but excited, obviously. And condensation starts to build up inside the sub because of this temperature change. It's 6 inches thick of titanium, the sphere that you're in. But the ocean is so cold, freezing at a lower temperature than salt water freezing at a lower temperature. And this cold transmits through the titanium in, now you're seeing your breath. And you're also seeing this condensation. For a moment, I forgot about the condensation. And at this very moment of I was doubting or questioning my decision to do this, one of those small droplets of water let loose off the top and hit me in the back of the neck. Houston? I really, for a moment, I was like I'm going to tell the captain, Jenna, hey, we might have a leak, right? At this depth, there's no leak. A pinhole cuts you in half. That's the pressure, right? So as we continue to the bottom, I knew at 3,800 meters thereabout would be a touchdown on the ocean floor. I think it was 38.26. Now Jenna had grabbed the controls moments before that. There were propellers, the big propeller you saw in the back, but also 2 on the side that kind of stopped the descent. Felt a very light touchdown on the ocean floor. And he did a few things, then he turned to me, very, very little English, if any, and he pointed to that porthole. So I got my face up to the porthole and I looked out, ink black, not a thing. I hear a click, and then very slowly the lights of the exterior came up. And first, we're this far, by the way, those of you at home, we're gesturing about 3 feet off the ground. That porthole is 3 feet off the ocean floor. So I see ocean very, very calm, very clear, by the way, by this time that he turned the lights on. And I follow the ocean floor and the lights, and from here to the back of the room, maybe even closer, there is the bow of the Titanic.
Oh,
Now, Jenna was an experienced pilot, but he also had a little touch for theatricality as well, obviously, because little before this image, we started to climb up the bow stem, and right over that railing, I think more, yeah. And, you know, I couldn't help but think of Jack and Rose and King of the World and all that railing. But the excitement that I felt was just, I mean, everything about being a kid going to Wrigley Field for the first time or whatever it was, I was like, I can't believe I am. Well, I'm going to take you through that journey for just a little bit now. We go over the railing. This is a shot, not of our sub, but I wanted to show you how close they get. Remember where I told you or you saw where the portholes are, right? So I'm that close, and you almost feel like, is he going to hit the railing?
yeah.
Jenna knew what he was doing, but didn't hit the railing. The anchor, the spare anchor, is right there, right in the bow. Went right over that, right past the mast that is the main mast that held the crow's nest, where Frederick Fleet rang the bell, warning of an iceberg, right? This was that mast. It has fallen over now onto the ship. Past some of the deck of the ship, another photograph, like I said, I was not in this one. Past the winch that raised the anchors. This is the main steering mechanism that is still there on the Titanic. The pilot house, if you will, I'm not sure that's the exact right term, but was wooden. So it's gone. It's been gone for a while. This was taken years ago. It is still on board the Titanic. It is still sits on top, but it's starting to fall in now into the ship. Once it does, it's lost forever. Would it be a good idea? You answer this question, to take those arms and grab it. They'd probably have to pull it off the ship before it falls in. I don't know the answer to that. Is it better to leave this ship in its final resting place where such a great tragedy occurred? But it still sits there. And you see the flag and the flowers. Over the years, people put plaques in this area when they dove the ship as kind of a memorial site. That again is that the right thing? I don't know, but that's that. So let me show you this. This is from Atlantic Productions. This happened in the last couple of years. You could never see the ship like this, lighting it at that depth, but they did this incredible 3D scan of the ship and then mosaic tiling, if you will, put this back together. So you see from the bow, the railing, the anchor, the #1 cargo hatch, the mast, and just out of the shot, and I think the next one will help us, right there is where that steering column is, and that's where the ship was steered. Now remember, when the bell rang and Frederick Fleet got on the phone and said, iceberg right ahead, well, the officer in charge made a decision to turn the ship. We talked about, you make your best decision at the moment, scraped along the iceberg, put the engines in reverse and stopped the engines. And it was Captain Smith that immediately was on. He was his jacket was off. You saw that in the movie. Cameron was great about these historical facts, even though Jack and Rose was a fictional story. But he had his jacket off. He had his hat off. He knew that something was wrong. Thomas Andrews, the designer, was on the bridge immediately, starting to assess the situation, sending folks down into those watertight compartments. For me, coming up that area and then going right by the bow, I also looked into a cabin, Captain Smith's cabin. The wall has fallen away, almost been removed like a movie set. if you will, you know, where you move a wall so you get a camera in there. His bathtub still has water in it. Sorry. Just irresistible sometimes. You know. But what was left of his brass bed also there. You know, as I looked in, because I'm from here to that wall looking at his cabin. This was the most popular captain on the seas. Some of you may know he retired. He was done. He promised his wife he wouldn't sail again, and the White Star Line got in touch with him and said, "It's the Titanic, and you're the rich and famous captain, meant for the rich and famous, for the celebrities. Can you take one final journey across the ocean for us and back?" And he said yes. Well, looking into that cabin and knowing that when he got the news from Thomas Andrews, the ship was going to sink, knowing that he was a man of integrity and he was going to go down with the ship because there were not enough lifeboats, knowing the distress calls were not being answered, I couldn't help but make that very personal connection to him and his moment of thinking of his wife, thinking of his life, and thinking of that decision to take one final journey. But he's always been portrayed as a man of integrity and just a great captain. But as you all know, he stood there on the bridge when the ship finally sank below the ocean surface. This is a view, once again tiling, of the whole wreck site. The bow section here to your left, the stern section, like I said, about, I think 600 meters, yes, 600 meters away. Now remember, this ship breaks in half at the surface and it falls to the ocean floor. It's like a small town breaking in half. So its contents litter around, end up on the bottom, but around the wreck site. This is called the debris field. And that's where the artifacts are recovered from. We talked about nothing's pulled off the ship itself. So when you see things on the ocean floor, like this simple plate, this is bigger, but it fell off the ship. This is a davit that lowered the lifeboats. A porthole. Leather. Let me tell you about leather. This is a leather trunk. Anything leather, turns out that the microorganisms that otherwise would eat away at paper and textiles, anything organic, are repelled away by the tanning, the chemicals used to tan leather. Okay, so we all, me too, you wonder, well, how did a postcard survive? How did a paper currency survive? How did documents survive? Clothing survive? Well, if it was in leather, right? When it was brought on the ship and recovered and you open it up, it was a moment of history. It was a capsule there. And that's happened so many times with the recovery of these artifacts. There's one in particular that I gotta tell you about that was recovered. It was a satchel. When we first saw it in that basket and brought immediately into the lab, there's a lab on board, they take it out of salt water, they put it back in salt water, but they wanted to open it. It looked like a small sleeping bag, okay? It was rolled up on itself. And we could tell there was an embossing on this satchel, this rolled up piece of leather, and it said Adolf Saalfeld, okay? And it's always hard to tell this story because this pardon me, all happened at once. When they took it out of the tank in the lab and they unrolled it, what we saw and what we experienced all at the same time, there were 64 tiny glass vials, no bigger than my finger, with little corks in the vials, with liquid inside, with paper labels. Lavender, lemon, strawberry. This is a perfume salesman, Adolf Saalfeld, heading to the department stores in New York to sell his wares. But when we saw that, the thing that was incredible is immediately when it was opened up, simultaneously seeing everything, the lab, which doesn't smell very good naturally, was filled with these beautiful sweet scents. So you talk about history being there in front of you. Once again, leather, the glass would have survived, the cork may have not, the paper may have not. And when that is on exhibition in other exhibits that have the artifacts, you can still, even though the cork is still in place, there's a little hole in the case where you can still smell. Some of you have seen that. But anyway, that was an incredible moment. certainly personal possessions. You see the shoe, once again, surviving in the ocean depths. Most folks, like I said, recovered artifacts. I wasn't recovering any artifacts. So I wasn't just the debris field. I had the Captain Smith moment, the over the bow moment, and also going to the stern. Oh, this is, sorry, a little out of place. The bigger things are put in baskets like this. The robotic arms will pick something up, put it in a basket. And then the large, this is a larger basket than underneath the sub. They're returned to the surface as well. But we went to the stern section. Now the stern section really imploded, okay? It really just is almost unrecognizable. What you noticed are the engines. These are the 2-story tall engines that we went past, and also the propeller of the three, one of the three. This is one of the 3 propellers. And we came up under the, if you remember the map or the image of the Titanic, the stern kind of cantilevers out in the back where Rose was going to take her life, right? So that is still there to some degree, but we went under the that cantilever to see this propeller, and we got stuck. Yeah. So the little Houston, we have a problem. This was kind of real. No panic by Jenna. He got us out, but that was a moment where I was like, what are we, did I do the right thing here? Yeah. You know? So, what's that?
Help us not on the way.
Help us not on the way. Yeah, remember, I should have mentioned this, you probably figured it out. These are not tethered. There isn't something holding on to the sub. There's another sub down with you. We talked about them leaving 30 minutes after. But if something goes wrong, chances are you're not coming back up. Well, now we're heading back to the stern section. And part of me, and it's just the way I'm wired, I guess, boy, it'd be great if I could pick up an artifact too. And as we're going right above the ocean of the ocean floor, I see something. And I pointed quickly, and Jenna, broken English, said, do you want that? Meaning he knew that I was with the exhibit. He knew that I knew the collection. So he stopped, he went back, waited for the silt or the fog of the propellers kicking up, and there revealed a box. And it was a box, a telephone box, from the bridge to what was still being called the poop deck, right, to the back of the ship. And I was like, oh, that is fantastic. And he says, let's pick it up. So he got onto those robotic arms, and he picked the piece up, put it in the basket. We returned. It's in the exhibitions that travel the world now. So my claim to fame is an artifact that says bridge to poop on it. But so delighted that was kind of a moment we had, obviously. So we make the ascent through this time. We had our lunch. We had our, I don't think I had to use the bathroom once, maybe too modest to take advantage of that moment. But when we got to the ocean, now it's dark, as you saw earlier. And one thing I didn't tell you about, I'm inside as we hit the ocean surface now, and we're bouncing around again. And it was a ceremonial moment for everyone on the ship to come out. You don't know exactly where the submersible is going to come up, right? Because now it's kind of, you're coming up not completely in control, but you know you're going to miss the ship, and it's going to be out there somewhere or out there somewhere. What's that?
300 Russians betting where it's going to.
Well, exactly. Well, what was great about that moment, you're sitting on the top of the ship. Many nights there was a moon part of it. It was a 6-week process, but sometimes the stars, of course, are as bright as they ever can be because there's no light pollution anywhere. So you're scanning the ocean, and the lights are turned on. So when it gets to the ocean surface, you see right before you see these wonderful blue lights, and there it is. And that boat runs out, and the cowboy jumps on top and hooks it, and they bring it back. And I won't say there was relief, but there was relief when, of course, it was picked up, things calmed down, they opened that hatch, and I had returned to the Keldysh. It happened once. 5 years later, I went out with RMS Titanic again and did it from the surface, a robotic ROV dive. So I had big screens in front of me, and I said, that's what we want. No, we have enough third-class teacups, Did it all from the surface with ROV. That was exciting, but it was not like this amazing adventure. So let's talk about the exhibit a little bit. once you go out there, you really feel a responsibility to the passengers and crew, as you can imagine. So it's always influenced me, and quite frankly, it's influenced me on other exhibits as well. Just if you're going to do this, especially if you're going to have an entertainment version, meaning the grand staircase, the things to look at, things to feel, you always have to go back to the people that were affected, the people that were involved, and know that you're doing them a service to represent their story in a fair, beautiful way with integrity and honesty. So I've always carried that with me from that amazing experience of diving the ship. I'm going to bring you through. Where are we at time right now? Okay. I'm going to go through the exhibit real quick out at Skokie. These are photos I just took yesterday. We start with the construction of the ship that started 5 years, I think, before she launched and did sea trials. This wonderful model, and you see this photo at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, where the keel is being laid and the first ribs are being put together to build the ship. You board the ship in the exhibit. You recognize those doors. They were actually on board the ship. You walk down a first-class hallway. Want to put you there. People insist that somehow that hallway moves. It doesn't move, but theater of the mind a little bit, convince themselves. We've got a first-class parlor suite. That teacup, by the way, sitting there. As I told you, this is a different collection of artifacts. These are not from the ocean floor. These are associated with the Titanic, whether they were White Star Line, whether they were from passengers. There was a postcard in the exhibit sent by a 19-year-old crew member, so excited, from Southampton. He says something like, "My digs are terrific and the ship looks bigger than it does on this postcard." Unfortunately, lost in the sinking. He was the Turkish bath. The first class had a swimming pool and a gymnasium and a Turkish bath. He was an assistant. But this teacup, it's the most exclusive china. I'm sorry I don't have a close-up of it on board. Everything said White Star Line. This says White Star Line on the bottom, and it was meant for the first class passengers that had a private promenade deck, whether it was for morning tea or for evening late night snack. But what's amazing about this was on the Titanic, but not recovered from the ocean floor. We talked about that route earlier, Southampton, Cherbourg, Queenstown. You could book passage just from Southampton to Queenstown. And this first class passenger, much like the joke of taking towels from a Holiday Inn, took this off the ship at the time. And this wonderful collector, 380 artifacts are in this exhibit. As you can see here, all connected to Titanic, not from the ocean floor. I want to be clear about that, but they all have amazing stories. There's the second class china from the White Star Line. Remember the Olympic and the Titanic and what was to be called the Gigantic. Did we talk about that yet? No, I don't think it. The third ship, the three sister ships, but because of the tragedy, because of the accident, the bravado that the PR people were having about the biggest ship in the world, they decided to change the name of the Gigantic to the Britannic, knowing that let's not boast about being large anymore, But all the china was White Star Line rather than the individual name of the ship. Light fixture from right outside the elevator. This one's from Olympic, I think. We have, again, a full-scale creation of the grand staircase. It's always interesting to me when people walk in. More than not, people look at it and go, "Oh, it looks just like the one in the movie." Well, the one in the movie looks just like the real one. But this is our grand staircase. Pardon me, third class cabin, third class hallway, into the boiler room. It's a little more, you've got sounds and music and sound effects throughout the exhibit. This is a very loud area. Remember, we pay tribute to the men that had the hardest job on the ship, shoveling coal on 12-hour shifts. And they were the first to know there was a problem, because when the water started to come through the cracked, if you will, or separated plates of the ship, the water rushed in. They were running. You saw that in Cameron's film, kind of running for their lives as the watertight doors were coming down. And most of those men were lost in the sinking. You walk out on the promenade deck. Remember, it was a beautiful night, April 14th, until it wasn't. And we then take you into, let's see, hit the wrong one there. Oh, this is a deck chair from the Olympic. And Some of you may remember the ice that we had in an iceberg, if you will, in MSI. This is a little different. There are moments, places to put your hand in and feel how cold the water was. Remember, most people didn't drown. They first died of hypothermia that night because they were in the ocean, right? Those that were not trapped inside the ship. This is an outline of a lifeboat. Some of those went out half full, as you remember, rather than, because people felt far more secure on the ocean, on the Titanic, until it really started to go bow first into the ocean. This is our memorial gallery. Everybody that walks in gets a boarding pass. And on that boarding pass is the name of a passenger, the class they traveled in, and a little bit about them, but not their fate. And folks initially take that as a souvenir, I think, and just kind of something that is fun to get. And, you'll see, oh, look, dad's in third class and mom's in first class. But as people make their way through the exhibit, and the exhibit that starts out with such great hope and optimism, like the story, you then start to connect with this passenger. And you see a little bit on the wall there. All of the passengers and crew are listed, whether they were lost or saved. And people will not leave the exhibit till they find their passenger's name on that wall. And it occurred to me, it's not so much that now they're best friends, with that passenger, but it becomes personal. And as we all know, this tragedy has been followed up. We had the space shuttle, or the cutting edge of technology, and we had that problem. We had just the other day, or weeks ago now, the Baltimore Bridge issue. Everything's fine until it's not in our lives. And I think people, as they look at that wall and look at that boarding pass, they're also looking at their family and their friends and realizing how fragile life is and how uncertain life is and how it's important to value every minute. You're with friends tonight, you're with loved ones. Life is fragile. Life is uncertain. This story tells us that, as many stories have in the past. Value those people. That's something I remember all the time from this story. We take you to the ocean floor with this video and this glass floor that you walk over. And here's my thank you to the Chicago Maritime Museum. Not this. Put a lot of sequence. We have a movie gallery as well with movie props. And now for the thank you to the Chicago Maritime Museum. We have our gallery with the Eastland. And there, as you can see in that large blow up, and you can see right here, make sure you do before you leave tonight, what a tragedy that was. And we talked about that earlier. But thanks to the Maritime Museum, we have this wonderful artifact, the porthole from the Eastland. It's on loan to the exhibit, and we could not be more thankful. I had this past a week ago on the 10th, so that was, I think, Wednesday. We had a family, and we'll do questions or wrap up here in just a moment. I just got one more thing here. We had a family come who was the direct descendants of second-class passenger Bertha Lehman. And Bertha was traveling by herself. When the ship started to sink, she was uncertain about, and she didn't speak, her English was not good. She was taking care of a baby that they met a family on board, and she was a caretaker for this ship. And when the Titanic was going down, but seemed quite stable, she was torn whether to get in a lifeboat or not. It turns out John Jacob Astor, you know that name, richest man on board the Titanic, he advised her to get in a lifeboat. When she was still uncertain, the band, the quintet or the quartet that played Nearer My God to Thee, right, while the passengers were being loaded, one of those folks knew her English was bad. One of the musicians grabbed her hand and put her in a lifeboat. And she survived, and she made her way here to the Midwest as well. It occurred to me the passengers' families that I've met over the years and how fantastic that was. Melvina Dean was 9 weeks old when Titanic sailed, and she was the youngest passenger aboard the Titanic. She was handed in a potato sack, a burlap bag, so that they had something secure to hold on to at 9 weeks old, from her father to her mother. Her father was on the Titanic. Her mother and her brother were in a lifeboat. handed Melvina Dean across into the lifeboat. The lifeboat was lowered into the ocean. Melvina, her mother, and her brother survived as her father stepped back and he was lost in the sinking. Mm-hmm. We took our exhibition a couple years after Chicago to London. And guess who came to the opening of the exhibit? Mm-hmm. Melvina Dean. Wow. She coincidentally, although in some way predictably, also was the last surviving passenger aboard the Titanic, or from the Titanic. And she died at 97 years old, I think, in 2009. I had the great pleasure of taking her through the exhibit. She was in a wheelchair, but as sharp as anybody could ever be. She was funny, but she also had a moment where she called me over and I got down close to her and she said, you know, I've never seen an exhibition. I've never seen the movies. I don't remember a thing, but I don't want to remember. I don't want to think of what my mother and my brother went through. But she was with us that night as we went through the exhibit. And later in the evening, she was the guest of honor at the gala. And she stood up behind a podium like this as people gave her a standing ovation. And she said, I'm not going to try an English accent, but imagine with a beautiful English accent. She says, I don't know what all the fuss is about. I don't remember a thing, but I'll be happy to drink your wine. Cheers. Well, she was the guest of honor that night. I feel truly like a guest of honor this evening. This has been a wonderful evening for me. Appreciate you very much. And if you want, do we have time for questions, do you think? Yeah, if you have any questions. If not, don't feel like we have to ask them. Yes. Was there radio? There was radio contact, and between the two submersibles, but it was in Russian, so I didn't, when we were stuck under the propeller, I didn't know if they were saying there's an issue or if everything's fine, right? But there's radio contact. No, ultrasonic, and I don't think we radio waves through the voice radio. We had contact. We had contact until a certain point going down, and then radio contact between the submersibles. Yeah, yeah. When you say, what was the term you used? Yeah, when some of you know of this, the tragedy that happened again, this recent, within the year now, I guess, of the Titan, the submersible that went down. A bit of a personal connection there. The Frenchman, P.H. Nargelet, feel free to Google him tonight. Amazing man, knows more about deep sea exploration, been to the Titanic many times. He's the guy CNN grabs if a plane crashes in the ocean. He was on board the ill-fated Titan submersible and lost his life. But a great man, and I'm honored to say a friend of mine. Yeah.
I have a question about the Keldysh.
Yeah.
The subs were launched about 30 minutes apart.
Yes.
Were they from the same launching crane, or did they have a crane on board?
There's one crane in between the two.
Okay.
And they face each other when they're on the deck. One picks the crane picks up one, puts it in, takes it out, it descends, they pick up the next.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
How many pairs of shoes or boots did you see on the ocean floor?
You know, those are few and far between. I think I saw maybe, they don't have to be together, right? So I think maybe saw 3, but a number have been recovered over the years and are.
I think if they were together, that was at one time.
Yeah, it could be, of course. Most of the bodies that went to the ocean floor were inside the ship, for obvious reasons. Yeah. And of course, so many were on the surface. The gentleman, his body, the crew member I referenced, his body was never found. We have a medal in the exhibit, a gold medal for swimming that was presented to, you'll have to give me a second to remember his name. I should know my dad's name. My name's Mark Lach. My dad's name, Edward Lach. This gentleman's name, 19 years old, Edward Locker. And he was lost in the sinking, but on his body was this, as part of his possessions, was this medal that he won 10 years earlier as a 9-year-old. Wow. And he was, the ceremony, he was actually buried at sea, but he was recovered. The pieces, the personal effects were taken off him and returned to his father later that year. And father wanted to be displayed as or the family did. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
So I don't know. The reason that you didn't take anything off the ship
yes.
itself is because you really can't get into it.
No, There is, and it's a little complicated and beyond my expertise, but there's a court in Norfolk, Virginia that oversees the wreck site. It's part of an international agreement that only one salver, only one entity can recover artifacts from the ocean floor legally. And I think it's 40 different countries that signed on to this to protect the wreck site. Remember, it's in international waters, and it's an American company that has the right to recover artifacts. One of the rules put down, I guess would be the right word, is you're not taking anything off the ship. Imagine going down and pulling that piece off. And this is something we should talk, make up our own minds whether it's appropriate, because eventually the Titanic, it's disintegrating. The ocean will take it back someday. It'll be nothing more than a stain at the bottom of the ocean. But the reason is that they can't legally take anything except in the debris field. Now, ROVs, very quickly, remote operated little guys, little ROVs with cameras have gone inside the ship and given us visuals, but can't take anything or pull anything off the ship. Yeah.
Now, why was there a Russian ship involved in this recovery? Are they the only ones doing the recovery?
No, there are a few submersibles that can go that deep. Now, blows my mind again, 24 years ago. But the Nautil is the French submersible that was part of that discovery dive. The Alvin is part of Woods Hole, is another submersible that can go that deep. But these two subs and this incredibly sophisticated, and it's still in use, not the subs still, but this is a scientific research vessel that had everything on board that you'd ever need to accommodate not only people, but laboratories, communication. In fact, when we were out at the wreck site, two things happened that were amazing. A hurricane, if you can believe it, made it that far north in the North Atlantic. We had to go off the wreck site. I'll never forget the day that the U.S. Coast Guard in international waters came out and over a PA gave us a warning, and then they got on the radio. And then also, it was called the Kursk, if some of you know this. A Russian military submarine was lost, 118 crew members, while we were out in doing our expedition. And a lot of the Russian, the senior Russian crew members were friends with some of those, and they were so, I'll say this, we all have our moments, I guess, but the Americans, we had a technique to rescue at that depth, even to kind of attach to the sub, but that offer to rescue was declined by the Russian government, and there was a lot of anger aboard our ship because of that decision. Yeah. Someone in the back had a question? Yeah.
You're actually starting in
Okay.
So if you're like late 90s, early aughts, like that was a very interesting time for Russian U.S.
Yes.
But I wondered what that was like on board and how that might have affected your process.
It's a good question. And I remember, now that you say that, what was your name? Kate. Now that you say that, Kate, I don't think I had apprehension, but that was in my head. We're in a Russian sub. Things aren't so good. What's going on? But immediately when you got on board, they were not Russians. They were scientists. They were explorers, very serious about what they did. And they could not have been more accommodating and more gracious and more, just made us all feel at home. And they were incredibly professional. Yeah.
You're selling your Levi's?
What's that? That's good. You know what I thought you said, by the way? This is totally inappropriate, sorry. But you said, did you sell them your Levi's?
Yeah.
I heard, did you soil your Levi's? Yeah, you knew that was the case. Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Was that the time used for the ship?
On the and it's funny, I was thinking this tonight because I haven't chatted about this for quite a long time, and I'm not exactly sure in days how long we were out there, but the dives had started when I arrived, as I mentioned. There were moments, the hurricane was one of them. There were also a few, it wasn't every day, by the way. It would be sometimes sequential days and then 2 days off, something like that.
For the dive.
For the dives, yeah. So
Your time on the ship at that.
about 4 weeks, I think, if I recall right, of a 6-week expedition. Yeah.
You have time for one more question.
And Madeline's in charge, by the way. And Madeline, a personal thank you. I know the museum took a vote, but Madeline was so instrumental in giving or lending to us the, well, screwed that up. Hi, everybody at home. I can see you. Hi, Valerie. In the loan of the porthole for the Eastland exhibit. Okay, one more you say, or two more? Oh, you're tough.
The dates for the now.
Yes. We were only going to be there, I think 7 weeks originally. We hoped we'd be here through the summer. We've just announced an extension to July 7th. And my sense is that we indeed will be here through the whole summer. For those of you that are interested, a sister exhibit is right. We're in I don't know if I mentioned, but a Bloomingdale's that is closed down. It's been a wonderful exhibition space. We've converted it. Next door, if you have a Downton Abbey fan in your family, we have a Downton Abbey exhibit right next door as well. Yeah. Well, thank you all. If you want, thank you. Just a delightful evening for me. Thank you so much. And a very special thanks to the Chicago Maritime Museum, to Madeline and Jim, and all those of you who have been involved. And Valerie, the work you're doing here looks fantastic. Congratulations. Valerie's online listening, and she's one of the designers here at the exhibit. So thank you. Thanks for coming. I think stick around if you like a little bit. I know this is a big deal till 10 o'clock at the whole Bridgeport Arts Center. Other galleries to see and artists and folks to celebrate. So thanks again. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. You'll be able to watch this online if you want. Bye, everybody.